What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com. Day 2 of the NFL Combine, Day 3 on the ground here in Indianapolis, and I've spent the day talking to running backs, offensive tackles, talking to NFL people, and now I think it's time I talk to you fine folks, Green Bay Packers fans worldwide, here on the old Facebook Live. Late Thursday afternoon. Well, what else would you rather be doing other than talking Packers? Steve, what's up? Thanks for joining us, man. Good to see you. Mike, hello. Thanks for joining us. A couple of things. Nothing really huge, earth-shattering news Packers-wise. But something I did put up today via social. Mike McCarthy, I was going back over some notes from yesterday's lunch. And I asked Brian Gutekunst and Mike McCarthy both about the NFL's plan to release the GPS tracking data from all 32 teams to all of the teams are going to get each other's tracking data. I asked them if their analytics team has even begun to crack that nut yet and see if they have any plans for it. And of course, they're not going to divulge anything. But McCarthy had an interesting quote saying that that's an area where they can compete and get an edge, which I found pretty interesting. I think a lot of people think of McCarthy as kind of a anti-analytics guy, anti-data guy, and nothing could be further from the truth. I know the Packers have used a lot of their own GPS stuff from practice for the last few years. Now they and all the other teams will have access to reams of data from all 32 teams. The Packers have a pretty robust analytics staff. I think it's 3 members right now. They may be looking to expand that, but they're going to have a lot of data to parse through. Now, what can be done with it? That's the big question, and that's what a lot of the NFL teams will spend this offseason trying to get their hands around. Well, some NFL teams, unless you're the Oakland Raiders and you have John Gruden as your head coach who wants to do. Sorry, guys. Got a spotty connection here. Is Raji there? No, Don. BJ Raji is not here. Alex says, please God, Landry at 14. That's a possibility. We'll see. He's going to test here in a couple days, and if he tests well, he may not last to 14. But he is definitely one of the premier edge rushers in this draft class. There's no doubt about it. Brett, what's up? How are you? Fishboil news. Timothy, the only news on the eating front is that I have a 7:30 reservation at St. Elmo's, and I still have to cut up the audio for my podcast. So this is going to be a short video. If we get a chance to sign Dez Bryant, should we pull the trigger and get him? No. Dez Bryant, fine player. Not the guy he once was. He's going to command a big salary. They just paid Devontae Adams a lot of money. They got 3 wide receivers, each with $10 million plus cap hits. I don't see them going out and getting Dez Bryant. What do you think about the league possibly changing the pass interference rule? Matthew, I hate it. I know what they're trying to do, but I think you're going to get a lot of defensive coaches telling guys, if you get beat, just grab your guy, throw him to the ground. We'll take the 15-yard penalty. I think it's a terrible idea. But, the NFL thrives on terrible ideas. Is $40 million per year crazy talk for Rodgers? I don't know about crazy talk. I don't know if they'll approach quite that number, but I think 30 is probably the baseline. I think it's where they have to probably start and probably past that once Drew Brees and Matt Ryan sign extensions. So is it crazy? No, probably not. I mean, I don't think you can name a number crazy when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers and his next contract, but I don't think he'll hit quite that. I think it'll be much more hovering around 35, but we'll see. Repeat the part on Gruden. Sorry for the lag. Yeah, there's a bad connection here. I was just saying Mike McCarthy and the Packers are very forward-thinking when it comes to analytics and trying to figure out ways to use them and get an edge, whereas John Gruden wants to go back to 1998. Davenport and Key seem overrated to me. Do you agree? Not a Key. I think Arden Key is a real talent, and I think he'll get taken in the first round, and I think he deserves to do so. Davenport, I'm not sold. And we'll see how he tests. I suspect his testing will get him drafted probably earlier than he should be, but Davenport, I might agree with you. I'm not completely sold on him. If we get a chance to pick up Richard Sherman in a trade, should we pull the trigger? It always depends on compensation. He's becoming an older player, now has had surgery on both Achilles. I'm not sure that's a great idea. I think he's probably still got a few decent years left in him. He's probably going to continue to play at a high level, but I'm not so sure about using draft capital to go get him. But we'll see. We need help on the line, both offensive and defensive, and then a cornerback veteran. David, I agree on the line idea, just because that's where you dominate. You got to dominate up front. Now, they don't necessarily need to use draft capital to do that, but I do think they'll probably draft 1 or 2 offensive linemen in this draft. They definitely need, a right tackle. Regardless of what happens with Brian Bulaga. Mike McCarthy told us yesterday Bulaga is working out down in Florida. All the early kind of indications, everything's positive. No talks yet of kind of any contract stuff. So, right now it would look like he's on course to, I don't think he'll be much of a participant in the offseason program just because he'll continue to rehab. And I still don't expect him to be ready for training camp or the beginning of the season. But positive developments there. But they're still going to need someone to play right tackle, even if they keep Brian Bulaga around, because he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the year. What number will Malcolm Butler wear once Packers sign him? 0, because it's not going to happen, probably. I don't. Who's the best edge rusher in your opinion? Dale, if you're talking about in the draft, I love Harold Landry. He's my guy. I've said it a couple times on here. I think there's obviously a lot of really good guys. People will go to bat for Chubb, and I get that. But to me, it's all about Landry. I think he gets a bad rap because of his last year there. You go back and look at his 2016 tape, you'll see a very different player, and I think that's the guy the NFL is going to get. Do you think Gutekunst will draft best player available or more on need? Well, yesterday when we were talking to him, he certainly sounded or checked all the boxes on best player available. Now, that said, he also referenced taking B.J. Raji in 2009 when they were overhauling their defense. That's a pick that was need-driven because they needed a nose tackle during that transition. So this is another year where the defense is in transition, but I asked McCarthy and Gutekunst specifically if they were looking at tape of Mike Pettine's defenses in either Buffalo or New York and trying to find, types of players that they might need to fill some holes. And they both adamantly pushed back on that idea and said they are very much about finding the best players they can and then coaching those players rather than being so rigid in their scheme and saying we have to get this kind of guy. If Orlando Brown makes it to 14, should the Packers grab him? Yeah, interesting that Brown was only able to do 14 reps on the bench press today. That's a bit of a red flag. I think they could be tempted because of their need at tackle, but I'd be surprised if they made that pick. Someone says, Gutekunst surprises everybody and drafts Quinton Nelson in the first round. I think the only way he can do that is if he trades up to get him. Now, Nelson was at the podium today and did say that he has spoken to the Packers. That said, they speak to everybody, so don't get crazy about that. But, yeah, if they want Nelson, I'm pretty sure they'd have to jump up to get him, and I don't see Gutekunst doing that. Although, wouldn't that be funny if Ted Thompson's first ever draft pick was Aaron Rodgers and Gutekunst's first ever draft pick was a guard? That'd be a nice little bookend there. Kenny Clark was a need pick. He happens to be pretty awesome. I agree. I think he was an excellent pick. Now, Miles Jack would have been a need pick as well, and he's turned out pretty good as well. So, I don't think there's any GM worth his salt that would lock himself into, I have to do it this way. The best GMs are always flexible and kind of take in lots of information and make an informed decision when they're on the clock. With this many needs, is it possible to miss on the first pick? Sure. Yeah, Ron Wolf did it all the time. I mean, go back and look at Ron Wolf's first-round draft picks. It's not a pretty picture. But he got a lot of serviceable players, and he hit on a lot of picks later on in the draft, and he built some incredible teams that way. Now, obviously the difference between him and Thompson is that he used every avenue available, including trades and free agency, to continue to build his roster. And everything Gutekunst is talking about, he sure talks the game as though that is how he is going to go about it. Now, we'll only know if that's true once the rubber meets the road and free agency starts and if he actually starts signing people. But right now, yes, you absolutely can. The problem with Thompson is he didn't miss. He missed on some first-round picks, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and he didn't augment his roster with using every avenue available to him. and that's why the roster got stale. Julia, the best tight end, I got to say, is Dallas Goedert. Goedert, sorry. I always get that wrong. I think he separates himself vastly when you look at the tape. There are a lot of talented guys in this class, but he's the one. Sign Fuller. Well, Jose is not completely sure yet that he's going to hit the market. The Bears still have a window where they could franchise tag him, and that's something that they're considering right now. Using free agency. Whoa, I know. Could Perry get cut? No, that's the second time I've seen that question today. I would be surprised just because it would be a bit of a cap hit to do so. They'd have to carry not a bunch, but a decent amount of dead money if they did so. I would think if he continues down a unproductive, injury-riddled path, I think next year that could be a possibility, but I'd be very surprised if it happened this season. Now, that doesn't mean it won't, but I think they'll stick with him for one more year. Draft 3 tight ends. I guess anything's possible. I'd be surprised, but, let's get nuts. What did we get for compensation picks? Jordan, they got 4 comp picks, which was tied with a couple other clubs for the most given out. They got a 4th, I believe 2 5ths, and a 6th. This free agent thing you mentioned, Aaron, explain. Ted was our GM. I know, it's a foreign concept. As Mark Murphy said, all this next GM has to do is anything in free agency, and he'll have done more than Ted Thompson. The president and CEO of the Packers said that publicly into a microphone. That still kind of blows my mind. We need to trade Perry for a 2. Who's giving up a second-round pick for Nick Perry? Let's come back from La La Land, shall we? Will we see some Packers-style drafting in Cleveland since they got 2 of our guys? Well, they got 3, really. They got John Dorsey, they got Elliott Wolf, and they got Alonzo Highsmith. And, yeah, I think you will. I think you'll see, not Ted Thompson style, I think you'll see Ron Wolf style, is what you'll see there. Vince Beagle possible for inside linebacker? I think they need to see what they have outside linebacker first. You got to remember, I mean, you can just take last year and just wipe it from your memory banks because that kid basically didn't have an offseason and then was thrown into the fire late in the year. Give him a full offseason. Let's see what he does with a complete, offseason under his belt and a real training camp, and a full offseason of work. Because I think he will be an asset to this defense on the outside, but he's just, got to be allowed to practice. Move Clay back inside now. Corey, that may happen. I think some of it will depend on what happens with the draft, but I think he is better served, and I think the Packers' defense is better served if they put him on the inside. Now, the problem, of course, always comes back to if they do move Clay inside, they've got to have someone to step in outside. And, last year that was the biggest problem. Now, I think Reggie Gilbert has a chance to make some noise there. I think Vince Beagle should help in that regard. But they need a disruptor. They need a difference maker. And right now, that is just not on the roster. And you have to think that's where they'll be looking in the draft. Okay, guys, I'm going to take 1 or 2 more here. Let's see. Beagle is a good athlete. He will be good. I tend to agree, Scott. Anyone improving their draft stock so far? It's real early yet. They haven't even started the workouts. They start tomorrow. There was measurements today along with bench pressing. I think Brown probably hurt himself a little bit with the 14 reps, but I don't think anyone's done anything to really kind of jettison their draft stock. Trade Clay, too. He's too unproductive. You don't trade good players. He's still a really good player. And, he's got to probably take a little bit of he'll probably try to extend his contract so they can reduce his cap hit, but he does a lot that doesn't show up on the highlight reel. Hi, Deborah. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Ted Thompson did a good job at GM. I agree, David. Montrevious is going to take that step. Randall, the Packers better hope so, because he did absolutely nothing in his first year. Now, I get there was injury issues there, no question about it, but he was a healthy scratch for a good long while last season. And when he did get his opportunities, he did absolutely nothing. And that's a guy who did have an offseason. So, yeah, I think they definitely need him to. For a third-round pick, the investment they have there, they desperately need to get something out of him this season. Is Ahmad Carroll available? I don't know, Jonathan, but that's my favorite comment today. And I'm going to leave you with it. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. I'll be back tomorrow, and make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. Tom, Pete, Ryan, all sorts of great stuff up there. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.